Okay, good evening, Vietnam. This is live from LZ Bunker, the Veterans Live Show. I'm Ronnie Embers. I served with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, 1967 and 1968. Today's guest is Jersey Joe Archino. He's a military historian as well as the creator and host of the radio show, This Is Why We Stand. Joe's been interviewing veterans on his show for quite some time now. In fact, he started his radio show, This Is Why We Stand, out of his appreciation for those who serve our great country. He has interviewed hundreds of veterans and has stories to pass along from all wars, so this should be quite an interesting show. We'll get to him in just a moment, but first we have our Vietnam War timeline segment. Here we go. Okay, 1963. The United States announces the denial of funds to the Vietnamese Special Forces, which have been heavily used in attacks against the Buddhists. If the funds are used for purposes other than fighting the Viet Cong, the United States said they will not renew the agreement supplying the government with surplus food, which is sold to pay Vietnamese troops. Number one song in October 21st, 1963. Can I get a guess? All right, remember Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs? It was Sugar Shack. Remember that hot song, Sugar Shack? All right. In 1965, the siege of Plymouth was a series of assaults on by the Pavin on a CIDG camp manned by the United States and ARVN troops, Rangers, and 400 Mountain Yard allies. United States airstrikes and a relief force lifted the siege. It resulted in 326 enemy killed and a further 850 estimated killed in the siege and pursuit. 14 CIDG and 3 friendlies were killed. Friendlies meaning U.S. All right, so number one song, October 21st of 1965. Come on, by the Beatles, remember? Yesterday, oh, my trouble seems so. 50 years ago, bro. That's 50 years. Okay, 1972 on the timeline. United States Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and Lee Duc-Tho of North Vietnam reached a ceasefire agreement. It was signed on January 27, 1973. All right, here we go with another song, October 21st, 1972, by Chuck Berry. Come on, guys, you ready? My Ding-a-Ling. Here's My Ding-a-Ling. Remember that song, guys? Okay, I hope so. Okay, so now for our photo segment, with the photos you all sent in to us in the Vietnam Veterans Photo Club on Facebook. So let's go see these photos. All right, let's have that first photo. All right, this is sent in by Dennis Loop, service on LZ Stinson for 3 recon brothers killed in action. David Kuhn, William Blackman, and John Tex Dabrowski on January 17, 1971. From the 1st to the 52nd Infantry, 198th Light Infantry Brigade, Americal Division. That's a sad ceremony. All right, next photo. Okay, this is from Bill Barker. This is downtown Saigon. Actually, this was before the war ended, because when the NVA and Viet Cong entered Saigon, they tore that statue down. It's the statue of the South Vietnamese infantryman. Next photo. Stephen Novikov, Sergeant John Neal and Sergeant Stephen Novikov. Looks like, I don't know what they're on. Well, they're at the 90th SOS Detachment 1 in the Trang Air Base, Vietnam, 1970-71, night base security. I'd like to know what's in that big jug back there for nighttime security. All right, next photo. From Dennis Zembrower, Kon Tum, 1969, with Vietnamese Boy Scout leaders. Interesting. United States Air Force Weather Observer assigned to MAC-V and the Special Forces in Kon Tum. Check out their uniforms with the bush caps and the knee socks and shorts. Interesting. Okay. That's it for the photos, Matt? Oh, we've got one more from Barry. Yeah, Barry from last week. Thank you, Barry. He's standing in the APC there. I think I asked him last week where it was, and he's telling us now by it's the boonies in the boonies. That means out there in the bush or whatever, in the jungle, in the forest, whatever you want to call it. Northeast of Khartoum, June of 1969. 4th Infantry, 2nd of the 8th Mechanized, A Company. It was an operation, basically a sweep operation, which just went through the territory, running around looking for in the jungle for looking for trouble and enemy positions. It was quite dry, so he threw burning pieces of C4 into the grass on the way out and exposed a couple of small rice and weapon caches on the way back, which were destroyed. He was a driver squad leader for most of his time. With 45 days to go, his track took an RPG, that's a rocket-propelled grenade, under his driver's seat and began an immediate assault. He took a second RPG in the periscope behind his head, and since his body was on full adrenaline after the first hit, he had no idea of the extent of my injuries, he says, and grabbed the laterals. That means like the steering mechanisms, and floored the hell out of it, bent on running over the North Vietnamese troop who fired at. Unfortunately, he blacked out due to blood loss, though the 50 caliber did get him through. Interesting photographs. And guys, don't forget, you can send your photos to Vietnam Veterans Photo Club on Facebook. At the top of the page is a segment for that. Okay. Okay, they were great. Thank you very much for your photos from the Vietnam show. Let's go to the group on Facebook. There's an announcement there submitting your photos. Really easy to do. Just go to the top of the page. You'll find out where you can do that. All right, so now we're going to bring in Jersey Joe Archino into our bunker. How you doing there, Joe?
Ronnie, it is an honor to be on your program. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on tonight.
Okay, I guess it's just a little role reversal here.
Yeah, you could say that again.
Interviewer, and now you're the interviewee. And let's start out by hearing a little bit about yourself and what you do with your radio show.
Sure. Well, again, thank you, Ronnie, for bringing me on tonight. So I went to Iona College in 2012 with the dream and the ambition of becoming a sports broadcaster. And I've done a lot of really cool things in the sports broadcasting business. But I've always really had my first passion be military history or the United States military. I've always been so drawn to stories of incredible valor and the people who've served our country. And I thought one day, I have this talent as a broadcaster. Is there a way I can give back to those who've served our country? Can I tell the stories of veterans who've served our country? And that's kind of where This Is Why We Stand was born. So since 2016, I've been hosting a radio show where I've been so lucky and honored to meet and share the stories of so many incredible veterans from World War II to Korea to Vietnam and beyond. I've met some of the most amazing people, and just to be able to share their stories with the rest of the country, it really is so humbling, and it really makes me so proud each and every day to go to work and do that.
Good for you, man. That's great. I've seen you work, and then I see how happy you get when you go, really, this guy, it's really good, man. And in that kind of thing, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates, I guess, right? Someone once said.
Hey, that's a good way to put it. And Winston Groom, Vietnam veteran himself, amazing author. And it's very true what you just said there, because you meet so many amazing people. And for me, I've developed friendships with so many of the people I've had on my show, such as yourself. So many people I'm lucky to call friends I've met through the show. And that's just another one of the rewards that have really come from it.
And the connection has grown with these people over the years?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, look at where I am right now, because you and I met each other on a cold January show at Scarsdale, Florida, a couple of years ago. You've been on the show many times after that, but you stay in touch with people, and people such as yourself who come out with constant great content all the time, such as this wonderful Fallen Never Forgotten. You've developed those relationships, and you get to know those people, and you continue to bring them on, because you always feel like there's always so much more to a story. And that's why I've had a lot of the people I have on my show. I always tell people you're always welcome back. Just because you're on one time doesn't mean that's going to be the only time you're on. People always come back because they always have more to share.
I guess that goes into the depth of how you learned how these guys were treated too from the Vietnam War.
Well, absolutely. And, I've told you and so many others, I feel a special connection with the Vietnam veteran because it's always broken my heart to hear the stories of the way our Vietnam veterans were treated when they came home. I mean, Vietnam veterans, I've become friends with so many of them. Tom Georgie, Jerry Morano, John Fratangelo. I know so many who are incredible men. And, again, these are people who put their lives on hold, answered the call to serve, went and fought a very difficult, brutal war. And when they came home, they did not get the respect and the recognition they deserve. And that's why I think, because our Vietnam veterans didn't get the welcome home they deserved then, it makes it all the more important for me to make sure they get the welcome home they deserve now. So that's one of the reasons, to me, it means so much to have developed so many relationships with Vietnam veterans and to be able to share their stories. And, Ronnie, I know so many in your audience are probably come from that same type of background where, they had so much difficulty coming home and they didn't get that welcome home. So to all those who are listening, who have served in the Vietnam War and the Vietnam era, I say welcome home to all of you. Thank you all for your service. I think, everyone who serves in times of war is the best of their generation. That goes for the World War II generation, the Korean War generation, the Vietnam War generation, you name it. Every American who's set foot on a battlefield or has operated in a war zone is the best of their generation. And I hope no American ever forgets that.
That's quite a quote. It's pretty well put, because most people only think of standard kind of quotes that certain politicians brought out for their own benefit, and yet in that war, they were like, I'm going to say it, they were a bunch of gutless politicians that didn't defend the right to the guys, and didn't serve them when they got home. We had a parade in late 1990s, 18 years or 15 years after the war was over. They had a Vietnam parade in New York City. It was like 15 years after the war was over.
Stuff like that, just again, it breaks your heart. For me it does. And again, it just emphasizes that point, why it's so important today to make sure our Vietnam veterans get the recognition that they deserve. They might not have gotten it back then, but if I can do anything about it, they will now. And kind of going back to that, Ronnie, so many of the conversations I've had, there's so much frustration, and understandably so, on the Vietnam veterans' part, because again, so many of you guys went, you put your lives on the line, you went and you answered the call to serve, and the support was not always there. You always feel like there were so many people high in the higher up echelons who were controlling things, who just made the job of all the people who are on the ground more difficult. And I think I've heard that over and over again. And I think that's the worst kind of thing you could do, is to interfere, to handcuff those who are out there doing the job on the battlefield. You have to give them all the tools they need to succeed. And this is one of the lessons, I've learned from veterans from the Second World War as well. It's just, we need to do everything in our power to enable those in the ranks to succeed. Politics aside, you put all that stuff in the side. At the end of the day, all that matters is positioning those on the battlefield for success. Politics should never get in the way of that. And I think too many times we've seen, and especially in Vietnam, that was one of the unfortunate cases where that did come into play.
Yeah, I have two trains running down the same track with those things. One was that I always believed if we bombed Hanoi and Haiphong like we did Berlin and Bremen in World War II, if we bombed those two cities for 2 weeks, the war would have been over in 2.5 weeks. Just leveled them. Number two was that there was incredible ground rules in Vietnam. And one was that you couldn't fire unless someone fired upon you first. It's like, hello, so you see some witch running across a rice paddy in black pajamas with a SKS, and you can't shoot them because they didn't shoot it. They didn't fire at you. It was like amazing. So like I don't want to go off on that too far. So I see that we have a couple of local friends in common. Ronnie Toki.
Yes, I think we do.
There you go.
Ronnie, it really goes back to, I think, why I feel so lucky about being able to, my show is based out of Westchester County, New York. And I feel so lucky. People like Mr. Tochi have been so supportive. I've interviewed him a couple times on the program. Dan as well at the Hudson Valley Honor Flight. And, it's just everyone's on the same page. We're all trying to work together to support our veterans. They come from a unique standpoint, and they've sent so many incredible veterans onto my show. And I've got to meet and develop relationships with so many of these people because they sent them on. And I'm so grateful to Mr. Tochi and everyone who works in his office because I can honestly say I've met lifelong friends because of them. And I've been able to share amazing stories with the public because of them and all of their hard work.
Yeah, Ronnie Tochi and I were stationed at Fort Bragg in the 82nd Airborne Division back in 1967, which was interesting. And Dan Griffin is the president of Chapter 49, Vietnam Veterans of America in Armonk, New York. And now he's the head of the Westchester director. He's the director of the Westchester Veterans Service Agency. So interesting how things intertwine over the years.
I love that. I've the two of you have had on the show, and I think that's just such a cool little factoid right there. I love it.
Yeah, great. How about this special guest that you met at West Point last Christmas time?
Well, I have to
folklore. Tell me about Vince Speranza.
Well, I have to thank you so much for that opportunity. In December, you invited me to come down to the Thayer Hotel right by West Point, and I got to interview the legendary Vincent J. Speranza, World War II veteran, Italian American like myself. So there was so much I admired about that man, and I mean, just to admire his spirit. When I turned my camera on, he didn't stop talking from the minute I turned it on until the hour was over. He did not skip a beat, did not take a sip of water. He just went on, and I hung on to every word. It was one of the most memorable interviews I've ever done. Just starting off, he was talking about his parents coming over from Italy and how much they loved the country for the opportunity it gave them. And his father felt such a gratitude to the nation that when the Second World War came around, although he was too old, Vince said he told him and his brothers, "You must serve. This nation must not fail." And he instilled it in them that it was their duty to go out there and serve the country. And that is so profound, in that respect and admiration, I think, is one of the things so many Italian Americans really are so proud of. And so many Italian Americans served in the Second World War. They gave so much to this country. And that's such a great example. Vince is a special man. When he was talking about being outside Bastogne, Belgium, fighting in his foxhole during the Battle of the Bulge, German tanks driving over their trenches, and then the tanks move behind them. They pop their heads up to take on the German infantry. When you hear stories like that, it's living history, and it's so amazing. And to be able to capture those stories is so important. But one of the other things I always remember with Vince is you always wonder, especially with guys who've been in combat, what goes through your mind during combat, especially for someone who's never been in combat. And so many out there in the American public have not been in combat. So when they're able to kind of get that perspective, it's so important. And Vince said, a lot, when people always ask me, what did I think about in combat? And the words that always came back to him were what his father told him: this nation must not fail. I mean, you talk about a guy where you just love him, and Vince is an amazing guy. And when I heard that quote, this nation must not fail, and you think about this young kid being in a foxhole in the freezing cold, German tanks and infantry coming at him, and those words are just going through his head. This nation must not fail. That's special, and that's why it's one of those interviews I'll never forget. And Ronnie, I can never thank you enough for making that interview possible.
No problem. And I'll tell you what, there's two things there. One, he will never, when you ask him to sing the Blood Upon the Risers, it's an airborne song. It's like he just get up and sing it and keep going and sing all the verses and sing them over and over and over. And the second thing about Vince, we're trying to get him on the show. We're trying to make him understand what it's all about. Is airborne beer. Airborne beer. Vince is famous for airborne beer. So
that was a great story. And just to anyone who wants to kind of know a little bit more about that. So during the Battle of the Bulge, Vince told the story about there was a bar in town and one of his buddies had been hurt and he wanted some beer. So Vince took his helmet, went to the bar, filled it up with the beer, brought it to his wounded buddy, and he delivered. He gave him some beer. And he said that one of the medics pulled him aside and said, what is the matter with you? I got a guy with a chest case and you're over here giving him beer. And he basically threatened him up pretty good. But it's just another one of those legendary Vince stories. And Ron, I hope you get him on the show because again, you could just sit there and listen to him for days and days and days.
Oh yeah. Oh, Joe, how do we get people to look into your show and to tune into your show?
Well, thank you, Ronnie. So my website, thisiswhywestand.net. If you go on there, it has all of my interviews that I do. They're all posted on there. And, it's more than just that. I think more even than that, there's so much writing. One of my favorite things to do in addition to interviewing veterans is writing about military history. So, right now I'm working on a story about the surrender at Yorktown, General George Washington and the Continental Army. So it's all the time. There are news stories about events in military history, whether it's Ulysses S. Grant at Vicksburg, the Battle of Gettysburg, or D-Day, you name it. There are stories for just about everything. Incredible valor about Audie Murphy, Medal of Honor recipients from World War I, the Civil War, and beyond. So there's a little bit of everything there. So if anyone wants to check it out, thisiswhywestand.net. I think you will find plenty to keep you entertained.
That's great. We're going to do the sound off section now. Oh, Joe, you got a few photos, right?
Absolutely. Let's definitely go through those photos. Those are we got some cool stuff.
There you go.
So this is Frank Bellantoni, a World War II veteran. I got to have him on the show last Veterans Day. Some of his words I'll never forget. He said, I always say a prayer for President Truman and his difficult decision to use the atomic bomb on Japan to end the Second World War. He said, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for that decision. And I wrote a long piece about why that bomb had to be dropped to end the Second World War. There are people who try to criticize President Truman in the decision to drop the atomic bomb to end the Second World War. But when you meet people like Frank Bellantoni and you see, we were estimating there being about 500,000 to as many as 1 million casualties if the United States had to invade mainland Japan.
That's right.
It's terrible that so many had to die, but the atomic bomb was really the only way to end the Second World War. Japan was being controlled by the military, and they had no intention to surrender. They were willing to fight to the death, and it really was a difficult decision, but it was one that had to be made. And I think right there, Frank Bellantoni's words are living proof of that.
I guess the lesser of two evils.
It is, it just isn't. There's no easy answers. There's no easy decisions in war, but you have to make the greatest decision for the greatest number of good. And I think that was one of those examples.
Amen. Okay, let's get another photograph here.
This is a great friend, Mike Duty. Mike Duty was sent on the show, and he served in Afghanistan. Amazing warrior. This is at his place, Trinity Fitness and Nutrition in Rye. Mike is a business owner, a great guy, such a great example, I think, of veterans transitioning and becoming business owners. Mike is a great job running his business in Rye, New York. Anybody who's looking to get trained up, want to get a little fit, he's the man to go to. But I'm just so proud of him and everything that he does. He's such a great ambassador for younger veterans. And again, it's another one of those examples of you make these relationships through the show and these people become lifelong friends. And Mike actually gets a special spotlight in the documentary I did. I did a documentary about the American flag, the Battle of Gettysburg, why it's so important that we never take our flag for granted, why we always stand and are proud for our nation. Mike is one of the stories that gets highlighted in there.
Okay, next picture.
And Ronnie, you are right front and center in this one. This is one of my favorite photos. We did a special show for Vietnam Veterans Day right here. Before you have 4 Vietnam veterans, Ronnie, Jerry Morano, and then Chester Edwards. And my man Tom Georgie right there is a Silver Star recipient. He is a regular on the show, is on all the time. And, you know, it just to have all these 4 guys in the same room at the same time, hearing their stories and just saying welcome home to them and honoring Vietnam Veterans Day with all these people in one room. It was one of those memorable shows I'll never forget. And that photo, and no matter how many times I look at it, I get a big smile. It's just outstanding. I
like the grenade that Tom's got in his mouth, pulling the pin.
That's, I'm trying to think. Ronnie, I think you brought that grenade, and as soon as you gave that Tommy, I think Tommy had his eye on that, and he just, I mean, when you see him, that's a warrior's face right there. Again, Silver Star recipient. Tommy could fight beside anybody. He's a man I'd want by my side in a fight any day.
I got to tell you how we met. I'm driving down 287 towards the Tappan Zee Bridge out of White Plains going towards Hartsdale, exit 4. And I see the guy says, Vietnam veteran in front of me on the back of his windshield, a decal, like a big one across the back of the window. And he pulls off exit 4, and I'm trying to I'm beeping him and waving at him, and I pull him over. I get out in front of him and park my car in front of him at the light, and he couldn't go anywhere. He goes, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, how you doing, bro? Who do you serve with? This, that, the other thing." I don't know. Sometimes I just get excited to see Vietnam vets. I beep, I wave, whatever. And that's how we met. And then we got on the show together. And then
I love it.
He brought me to his altar. My altar's behind me, but his altar is like the altar of all time. We got to do a video of his place, get it on the show. And I gave him, he loves music. He loves records. I gave him about 200 of my record albums, my 33s, yeah, whatever they were called, a vinyl that I collected from the 70s and 80s and 90s. I gave it to him. I kept about 10 of my favorites, gave him about 150, 200 albums, and he loved it. It was great guy, great friendship, and little footnotes about how life goes on between veterans after they meet, you know?
No, you're not kidding. He's got the man cave of man caves. The first time he took, I spent almost an hour looking at every nook and cranny. And it's funny you mentioned that because I noticed he had a copy of your book. I saw that and I asked him, do you know Ronnie? Ronnie's a good friend. I've had him on the show a bunch of times. Yeah. And then he told me the story about when you flagged him down on the highway. So again, it's a small world, this community. Anyone who's in the world of helping veterans or just are friendly with veterans, you all seem to come back somehow, and it's awesome. It really is.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Joe. It's been a real pleasure, and hopefully, we hang on. And we're going to show you some things here. Any other thing you want to say?
Well, I do want to say, I'm grateful again to you for having me on. This was a really fun time tonight. And I really want to recommend people go and check out your website, fallenneverforgotten.com. It really is such a great treasure trove of just fantastic content, whether it's videos or I love the Vietnam War timeline on there. It's just fantastic. It's been helpful to me in some of the writing I've done on the Vietnam War. And I think for anyone, whether you're a veteran who served and you want to share something about the war with those who are younger and might not know as much, or just no matter where you are, what level you are, there's something there for everybody. So I can't recommend the website highly enough. And one more thing I do have to recommend, my friend John Fratangelo, his book, The Last Goodbye. John's a Silver Star recipient from the Vietnam War, incredible warrior, incredible man. His story is fantastic. I think anyone who's looking for a good book to read, we've got the holidays coming up. He's got a great documentary which just came out about his story. It's just phenomenal. So again, it's just supporting our Vietnam vets in any way that we can. The Last Goodbye is one of those ones where I one of my favorite books of the year. Can't recommend it highly enough.
I just want to thank you so much, Joe, because you had a lot of different things into the content from a different perspective, from the backside or from the outside, not being on the inside, obviously, of the veteran thing. And it's a pleasure. And Matt, we got some more pictures coming up. What's up? The sound off section. Okay. Again, Joe, thank you so much. God bless you. Take care.
Ronnie, God bless you, my friend, and thank you again to Matt for helping put this together.
Oh,
great time.
Matt does all that stuff on the website. So we got like
Matt
10
Matt is the technical director anyone would dream for. He is the best. Thank you, guys. Such a great pleasure to be here.
You got it, Joe. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sound off section. Okay. Best regards from an old CB. John Backman. Okay, John, thank you very much for sending those regards, and thanks for being on the show a couple weeks ago. Next. Dory Caroline, what a delight listening to Joe Archino sharing his passion for those who served our country. Thank you, Dory. He certainly has that passion. Facebook user, great show. And thank you, Facebook user. Is that your first name or last name? Appreciate it. And tune in next week for another surprise guest. And don't forget, people, send your pictures in. If you want to be on a show, volunteer to be on the show. No problem. We'll do a little bio. We'll get a little in touch with you. We do a little pre-show show and get some information, and we go from there. We need some Marines, some Air Force guys, some Navy guys, some LERPs. We had a LERP last week, sorry. Some Special Forces guys, recon, fighter pilots, bombers, a guy who worked on an air base loading the B-52, guy who worked on a battleship, New Jersey, or a whatever in the Gulf of Tonkin. It'd be great to have you all just spread the word, man. It's great to have these interviews about people and their history. Thank you so much. Welcome home. God bless you, and God bless America.